welcome to Implausible Nature, your home for all things Black Templar. On today's video, we are revisiting Sword Bros. So as we talked about in our last video with Primaris Crusaders, it's been a while since we've reviewed these two units and done like a tactics video on them, but just about a year actually, and a lot has changed since then, and so we thought it was appropriate to do another tactics video on these units and how we're utilizing them now in Pariah Nexus in 10th edition. What better way to sort of get back into more unit tactics videos than to dive into our two bespoke units? And today we're covering my favorite unit, Primaris Sword Bros. So, as always, we're going to cover the datasheet and their abilities real quickly here. So, Primaris Sword Brethren are notable in that they have a Space Marine stat line, except they have 3 wounds. So, a nice extra pip of wound there helps them a little bit. They're still not super durable, even with that 3 wounds, because they are still just toughness 4, and they don't have an invul save or a feel no pain or anything. What they do have is a boatload of weapon options and a really, really good ability. So their ability is Vow-Sworn Bladesman. At the start of the fight phase, you can select one of the following effects to apply to melee weapons equipped by models in this unit until the end of the phase. You can either add one to the attacks characteristic of those weapons or add one to the damage characteristic of those weapons. So we'll get into the synergies with this ability, specifically with leaders here in a little bit, but they are many, many synergies, which is why we love this unit. But you can get quite a lot of weapon options with them. They can be armed with chainswords. You're never going to take chainswords, so don't bother. The power weapon is just significantly better. Any model can replace his chainsword with a power weapon. The power weapon is 4 attacks. Standard power weapon stat line after that, strength 5, AP 2, damage 1. You can also get a Thunder Hammer, which is nice. You get those devastating wounds, a strength 8 weapon in there. You can get a pair of Lightning Claws, which is awesome. They get an extra attack, otherwise they are a standard power weapon that is twin linked, so that extra wound helps out. The Sword Brother Sergeant, technically he's called a Sword Brother Castellan, not to be confused with the character Castellan, but he has some interesting options. The most interesting one is going to be the Mastercrafted Power Weapon, which hits on 2s. He's basically the Castellan from the character as far as his weapon is concerned. He's got 4 attacks hitting on 2s, 2 damage each. Really, really nice for a sergeant to have that. And he can also take a combi weapon, which of course you're going to do so for that extra shooting. Speaking of shooting, they have some interesting shooting options as well. Per 5 man, you can take 2 Pyre Pistols, which is basically a 12-inch D6 hits, strength 4, AP 0, damage 1, flamer. You can get a plasma pistol in there as well. Note that the Lightning Claw guy can no longer take a pistol. He used to be able to once upon a time. He cannot take one anymore if you have the twin Lightning Claws, which is fine because it would have just been a bolt pistol anyway. So, you don't really have to worry too much about it. So you're going to have 3 ranged weapons in this squad, Pyre Pistols, Plasma Pistol, and then the combi weapon from the sergeant. So that's the data sheet. It's been more or less unchanged for some time. We haven't really had any changes besides the loss of the pistol on the Lightning Claw guy, which is fine. Like I said, it's just a bolt pistol. I'm not fussed about it. But other than that, their datasheet has been pretty much the same since the last video that we did. Anything you want to add as far as their datasheet, Bob?
No, I just want to make a comment on uh, nothing has changed, but to just reiterate that wound is, while it is on a Space Marine body without an invul, it is still important because there's a lot of damage to things out there. So
Mm-hmm.
you mess with the math with the damage to
Yep.
weaponry. So they have to basically plow through two of your wounds to get through.
Yep.
And if you're not in uphold, that's still significant. But if you're in uphold, that obviously you're going to get some
Yeah.
chances at saving that. So that's important.
Well,
Plus,
and go ahead.
oh, I was going to say, plus having the pyro pistols is sneaky, really good. Having some deterrence against some charges and getting some Overwatch ability in that, since they are Strength 4. So that is
Yeah.
something that is kind of important for you.
Yeah, absolutely. What I was going to say is if it's a damage 3 weapon and you are in uphold or you've, teched into uphold for, with fervent or something like that, um, the feel no pain gives you a chance to really mess with the math on those damage 3 weapons too. Um, so, um, so yeah. Speaking of their gear, we are going to run these always and forever, as we say on the Discord server, full Gucci. Literally take every option you can. Take all the pistols, take the combi weapon, take the claws, take the hammer. There's no reason not to take these extra weapons. And while some people might say, well, but it's gonna, take me a lot longer to, to roll the attacks and things like that. You'll get into the rhythm of how to roll these and which ones you're going to roll first. Because oftentimes, especially with the characters leading this that we are going to recommend, you're not going to need to get through the entire unit's worth of attacks to kill whatever it is you're targeting, right? So
Yeah.
you pick your weapons first of which ones you think are going to do the most damage and go from there.
Yeah. And a lot of times you're going to be telegraphing what these guys are going to be doing pretty obviously. Your opponent's going to know what's going to happen with them. So you can pre-prep your dice in advance so that you have your dice already squared away,
Yep.
so that you can save time doing that. So don't put your dice away into your little dice queue that you have after every single time. So that's gonna eat time, having to pull it back out, recount all the dice. Just pre-prep it,
Yeah.
and that's a best practice for you in any games. Just have your dice pre-prepped at all times so that you can quickly grab them, roll them. And honestly, you're probably only gonna have these things in combat, maybe 2 turns, maybe 3 at the most.
Yeah.
So
They're going
over
to get
time, when you
focused
get
on.
practice with them, you're not gonna be rolling them a ton of different times. So
Yeah, it's not going to bog the game down in our experience or our opinions. And they're going to get focused on. Their job is to go out and kill something, and they do that very efficiently. And if you can get them in to kill something else, even better. The chances of them surviving to kill a third thing is low because they're just going to get focused on because our opponents know how dangerous they are. So yeah, so that's the data sheet and how to kit them out. Always take every option, and the as far as synergies, let's get into the synergies of these. And the biggest and most obvious one is going to be adding a character to this unit. You're almost never going to run this unit without another character, without a character leading it. And the reason for that is Valsworn Bladesman applies to the character. So this is why they can be so devastating, is because they can really buff their character, and they can really buff the character can buff them, right? So it's a mutually beneficial thing. So you want to pick a character that they're going to really benefit from, or that they just take to a whole nother level. So we're going to get into what those character synergies are. Bob, what is your favorite character to run with Primaris Sword Bros?
Well, I'm not going to go with the obvious one. I'll save that one for later. But probably my favorite one is going to be the Emperor's Champion. And the reason why is it takes his already beef stick of ability to the next level. So whether you want to go with an extra attack if you're going against chaff units or you're going up against something really tough, you're going to bring that strike into damage 4 territory, and that makes it against a vehicle. It can take out monsters. It can do whatever it needs to do, especially if it's against a character unit where it's going to get those rerolls. So I think that's a really good take for him. If you're using the unit as a melee blender unit anyway, you don't necessarily care if you are getting a buff from them, because obviously the Emperor's Champion is not buffing the Sword Brethren themselves, but you are buffing the Emperor's Champion into the stratosphere and making it a monster character, and definitely something that everyone is going to steer away from, which is a win on the battlefield by itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I like the Emperor's Champion as well. He's one of my favorite takes on it. Like you said, that strike that has precision, and then if he's attacking a character unit, gets that +1 to wound. Really nice. It makes his sweep attack also really, really good. He's got a 10 attack sweep attack. That's strength 6, AP -2, damage 1, so it becomes damage 2. And it's one of those things that we're going to really be able to utilize. Even though he doesn't buff them, they make him so much better that you don't really need to, right? You can, if you need to, you can buff his squad with Fervent Acclamation to get some sort of bonus, whether like if you're in Uphold and you need lethal hits, or you want sustained hits, or whatever the case may be. Really lets you kind of do what you need to when you need to and still have this absolute beast of a character. So speaking of beasts, I will go with the obvious one, which is High Marshal Helbrecht. So obviously Helbrecht is really, really good on his own, and this unit just makes him like probably one of the deadliest characters in the game. Certainly for Space Marines. He's really scary, and he really buffs the unit too. Not only does he give them +1 strength, he makes them crit on 5+ instead of 6 up for normal crit hits. This is important because in Righteous Crusaders we have access to both lethal hits and sustained hits, so you can really like take him and his unit through the roof as far as damage potential. And he has a 12 attack sweep, which is just gross.
On top of his mortal wounds.
On top of his mortal wounds ability, right? Exactly. So not only is he really good, buffed by them, but also he buffs them a lot. And he can bring along an actual Castellan or Lieutenant, which I think is a great take. It makes the squad quite pricey, but you get those free built-in lethal hits. Critting on 5s is a really, really powerful buff. So if you're coming out of an impulsor or out of a transport, you don't have to worry about, oh, well, I can't have fervent them because they were in a transport. You don't have to worry about trying to stage them. You can just get them out and do what you need to on the turn you need them to, and not worry about them just annihilating everything that they touch. So those are definitely two very, very good picks as far as what characters to lead them. But there are some other characters that maybe you hadn't thought of. Bob, what's one of those characters that's maybe a bit off the beaten path as what most people think of?
Well, the Judiciar is probably the big one that I would say, and you're not really taking it for buffing purposes, but it does give something very important to the units, and that is fights first. So it allows you to play defensively with your sword brethren as well as offensively. Because as we know, fights first only really affects you if you are on the defense. So if someone charges in you and it's not your turn, because you are both fighting fights first, you will get to pick your unit first, and that obviously will be your sword brethren. So you're basically going to kill whatever charged you when they charge you, unless they have a really insanely durable unit. But in which case they're going to do a ton of damage to it. So that one is a good one. In addition to it, you are going to buff the Judiciar into damage 3 territory, which is important. So it's a nice breakpoint, so you can do some damage to Terminators, which also has precision if you need to. It will also strikes at a higher strength, which is nice, but I believe it only has 5 attacks. So that is something.
Yeah, 5 attacks.
But it does make them much stronger with that extra damage. Or you could, again, hit with more damage to attacks if you need to do that against like Space Marines, that type of thing. But again, you probably are going to be using the damage to get the rest of the Sword Brethren to the damage too.
Yep.
So it's a good take. It's one of those things that if you are getting out of a transport, so you don't accidentally, leave them into the open and get charged by something that you didn't predict had a big threat range as it did. Fast-moving units are coming to mind here. Eldar, Gene Stealers, things like that can move across the board really fast. Some Tau units that can do that. You don't want to get them tied up with chaff and not be able to fight or take them out before it's your turn. You don't want to get bogged down. So that makes it the play with the Impulsor much easier if you have them in the Impulsors, so that you can just get out with them and do whatever you need to do. It also allows you to play a little bit more defensively on the board too, which we'll get into the tactics wise on it. So I like them. They're pretty cheap. You can buff them in with your enhancements to make them a little bit stronger as well.
Like Perdition's Edge.
They're good takes.
We mentioned the Castellan / Lieutenant. That's an option as well for those lethal hits. The thing about them, I probably would pick most of these other choices before taking just a Lieutenant or a Castellan. Like, I'll absolutely run with one with Helbrecht. I think that's worth the points because Helbrecht gives their lethal hits crits on 5s. But just running one, just a Castellan, I don't know. Maybe in Wrathful Procession, where I need the lethal hits to be effective because I'm not getting much buffs from anywhere else. But in Righteous Crusaders, I'm gonna pick the Emperor's Champion, the Judiciar, or our next choice, a Captain or a Marshal on top of that as well. The Captain is really good for them in a number of ways. One, you can get a free strat on them once per battle round, so that's really helpful. And the Captain has a couple of different good weapon options. You can give him Perdition's Edge for additional damage output, AP, strength, all those kind of things. You can, if you're taking a Marshal, obviously you're stuck with the Mastercrafted power weapon, which, while fine, I think the regular Captain is worth it over that, because with him you can get a Power Fist, right? So you lose one attack, but you're gaining strength 8. You start stacking on things like Perdition's Edge, where you're getting +1 strength. Now you're strength 9, you're getting extra AP, then you get an extra damage. So you can really see where you can really do that. And then Finest Hour, you get Devastating Wounds, which is nice, plus the extra 3 attacks for that phase. So you can really kind of go Super Saiyan for one turn and wipe something out that needs to die.
Yeah, I agree. There's a ton of good takes with these different characters that can utilize them. One that I would probably not take, and it's unfortunate, but and honestly, there's not a lot of take for them in really any competitive list right now. Um, Beyond some skews, the chaplains. You can take chaplains with them, but their buffs just don't really synergize with what we're trying to do, and they don't do enough damage in close combat to really warrant the buffs that the Sword Brethren give. So that's something I would not take with them.
I'd rather have lethals than +1 to wound. Um, the math is very, very similar on what that +1 to wound versus lethals does for their damage output. But the simple fact is that if we're sending this unit into a oath unit, the rerolls to hit benefit crit hits more than +1 to wound does. So those rerolls on your misses, you have more chance to crit those lethals to get them through.
Yeah, the ceiling is higher.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah, another one that you can take with this that unfortunately I just don't really see the value in is Grimaldus. You can run Grimaldus with Sword Bros, and while having advance and charge or a 5-up feel no pain sounds good in theory with them, the thing is that aside from that defensive buff, there's not really anything else that he does that they need, right? He doesn't give them, any way to push wounds through, because at the end of the day, a lot of their weapons are strength 5. And while strength 5 is great in infantry, if you're trying to punch up into something hard, like a tank or a monster or something like that, you really need lethals. And while you can get those in Righteous Crusaders, I think Grimaldus is better off in a giant sword or Primaris Crusader blob versus this. And plus, same with the chaplains, Grimaldus is just not that good in melee. So the +1 to the damage just doesn't really hit home as well as it does on some of these other characters. All right. So those are kind of the synergies that, as far as characters go. Obviously, any of the buffs, from Righteous Crusaders or Wrathful Procession, so like +1 strength. Righteous Crusaders, we've already talked about lethals and sustained hits. There's also Crusader's Wrath, where you can get potentially +1 strength and a +1 AP. So all those things benefit these guys, but oftentimes, at least as far as Wrath, or at least as far as Crusader's Wrath is concerned, I found that often I don't need the extra AP, depending on what I'm hitting into, because a lot of times AP2 is enough, especially if the thing that you're hitting has an invul. You're probably hitting that invul already with your AP2. But it's an option there if you need it. So yeah, basically any of the buffs that we're going to stack on any other unit for melee damage work just as well, if not better, on this unit from our 2 detachments.
Yep, exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about tactics. How are we going to run these units and utilize them best in our games? What's your go-to tactic with these, Bob?
So mine, in most lists that I run, I typically run 2 units of 5 in impulsors. Then what I'm taking as a character really depends on the day and week, what the meta kind of looks like. Currently, I'm running a dual Judiciars with mine, primarily for the defensive side of it to give them fights first, so they're a little bit easier to use on the board. If I lose the Impulsor, I'm not going to just automatically lose the Sword Brethren into a charge against something deadly like the Drukhari, Sky Sky Splinter, you know how that goes for a lot of you that have played them. They can just be evaporated really quickly with the unit of Incubi. Some of those things that I want to have that option if the impulsor goes down, they're not just sitting ducks. So that's what I'm going to be taking. They don't necessarily get buffed by him in other ways other than just the damage output that he gives me. But the other thing is having dual GDCR means that I can have two identical units on the board, and I can put them on different sides of the boards, and they have equal threat opportunity versus having something like Helbrecht on one side of the board and Emperor's Champion on the other side. The clear threat is going to be Helbrecht, so that's going to be targeting Helbrecht, take him out of action, doing different things like that. So I try and be redundant in my units whenever I can to ensure that they are effective on the board. Now, when I'm having the impulsors, a lot of times I try and get them into position on turn one. I'll hug the cover, get them to where I need to, the point of the board where they're going to impact the most, because they're not really designed to just advance, and get to the opponent's side of the board and just hug around there, unless your opponent really kind of allows you to do that. They kind of get into the middle of the board, assault into something, and then just kind of just wreak havoc with the plans there. If it allows you to, after a battle is done, and you can consolidate into another combat or get into cover afterwards and then charge into something else, that's great. But you really want to pick your battles. Typically what I'll do is I will move them with the impulsor. I'll get out so that I'm able to utilize that 12-inch movement, and then get an additional 2 inches from the disembark, so that I can have a little bit more threat range. Then they're going to be in cover, in ruins typically, so they can't be shot at, and then use their movement the next turn to charge in. So usually that will get me into something that I need to get charged in turn 2. Maybe turn 3 if I deployed poorly, but usually it's turn 2. So that's one way to do it. And if there's really nothing, you can always keep them in the impulsor if you want. Use them as gunbolts, because you do have flamers too. So you remember that the impulsor, you can shoot out of that. So you can use the flamers outside the impulsor, use the impulsor's guns to do what you need. Plus you have a plasma gun, you have the combi bolter, or the combi weapon in there. So they're not a slouch sitting inside the impulsor either. So
yeah,
that's how I typically use them.
Plus, you can also advance the impulsor and still get out because of its special rule. So,
Yep.
if you're gonna if you want to get them out to stage them, and you're not quite there enough for to get into cover, you can advance that impulsor and make up that extra little bit of ground there to kind of help you with that. So, personally, I still love running Helbrecht with them, especially now that impulsors can carry 7. You can slap a Castellan in there and they can all fit in the party bus, as it were. I think the Emperor's Champion, while obviously Helbrecht and Friends is a little bit better, definitely better, the Emperor's Champion is no slouch, and I've often had people underestimate him and have him go into something that they were worried about Helbrecht, and then the Emperor's Champion just wrecks face. So I think it's viable to run them together. I've had success running the two of them into impulsors, but it's definitely not the only way to run them. Bob, how do you feel about putting like Helbrecht and a Castellan and 5 Sword Bros into a Land Raider, like a Land Raider Redeemer, for example?
So that's something that you don't want to do the 10-man unit. If anything,
That was
over
going to
these
be my
past
next
2 years, is it has been proven that you will not win consistently with that unit. It has been proven time and time again in tournament data. The list that take the 10-man Helbrecht unit with the Castellan does not win games. It's too much of a rock unit. However, you can do that with a 5-man unit and shave 150 points off the board in your list and use that elsewhere, and you're basically not going to see much of a drop off in damage output from these guys.
Yeah.
Not only you have Helbrecht and the Castellan buffing the Sword Brethren, you have it the other way around. So they will basically maul through anything that they point at, barring the toughest things in the game. Then on top of that, you have the Land Raider Redeemer, which is just a super annoying unit to have in the center of the board for its Overwatch ability. Target something, again, 12-inch range, that basically can evaporate whatever it is, unless they decide to use a CP on Armor Contempt or similar, because those damage 2 flamers, they hit hard.
They do.
Let's just tell you. And you get to assault right out of that Land Raider, so you could do keep the protected in that Land Raider, and then charge up on turn 2 and get all the range you need to, and just go to town. The only thing I don't like about the Land Raider Redeemer, as far as that goes, is, well, it is a lot of points, but that's a detractor. It's hard to maneuver through the terrain a little bit, especially with the ruins. So you can't go through walls with it. So you have to be very meticulous on where you're moving it, and then you do lose
and
the
where
2
you're
inches.
deploying it.
Yep.
So, the other thing too is, yes, the Redeemer is expensive. It's 285 points. But it's not just a box to carry your dudes to battle. It's a really good unit in and of itself. It's a huge Overwatch threat. You don't want to be anywhere near those flamers. So it really can lock down a part of the board with that Overwatch threat. And it's really durable to boot. I mean, it's a Land Raider. It's got a 2-up save. It's tough 14. It's 16 wounds, I think. And important to note, it has smokescreen. So you can pop smoke on it and make your opponent -1 to hit and get benefit of cover, even if you're just standing out in the open. It's not like you're paying 285 points for a box. You're paying 285 points for another really high threat, durable unit. Now, something else that I have seen a lot of players do, and I don't think it's a good idea, and I'm sure you don't either, but tell us what your thoughts are on taking 2 5-man squads plus characters and stuffing them in a Land Raider.
I mean, you can do it. I mean, it's not the worst thing in the world, but then you're just way too many eggs in the same basket, in my opinion.
That Land Raider is priority number 1 for your opponent to blow it off the board as fast as possible.
It's the only target that your opponent's going to go with. With all of its guns, all of its small arms fire, everything is going to be going into that thing. And let me tell you, they go down fairly quickly with focus fire. So you want to have other threats on your board other than that, because if they devote everything to your Land Raider, it's going to go down, and you're going to be stuck walking, and guess what?
You're going to get shot.
Bye-bye, Sword Brethren.
Yep. So while it's better than the single 10-man unit inside, I still don't think that it's smart to do that. Because like you said, it puts all your eggs in one basket. It's not something that is really going to be wise for you to do, because you can end up handicapping yourself if your opponent blows it up, which they're going to try to. So we've talked about the Land Raider.
Literally half of your army.
Yeah, exactly. So we've talked about the Land Raider. We talked about impulsors. I have also seen people ask whether we should walk them.
Theoretically, you could do it. I just don't think it's really wise. If you're playing very ticky-tacky with them and hiding, going ruin to ruin, you could theoretically do it. But there's just too many angles that you can get with too many different armies, and then something's going to get a shot eventually, and then they're going to go down. And if you're playing to jump between terrain piece to terrain piece, you're not using them for what they're supposed to be used for, which is charging into something and killing them.
Yeah.
Now I know that the boards are smaller than they have been in the past in general, so it's not like you're walking like for 3 turns to get to some place at the middle of the board.
Yeah.
But even still, there is a significant space in between terrain pieces, even on GW terrain boards. And if you're just doing it that way to walk them across the board to get somewhere, unless you're rocking an invul save, I would not recommend it. It just
I think
it's not
it's
worth it.
possible that it can work in Wrathful Procession simply
Yeah.
because you're getting an extra 3 inches of movement with move and advance. So it's a lot easier to go from terrain to terrain and make sure that you're getting where you need to be so that you can keep them safe until they're ready to make their charge. Um, so I think in Wrathful Procession, you could get away with it,
Yeah.
especially if you're already running like a ton of other units that you're shoving down your opponent's throat. The last thing they're going to be worried about is the sword bros that are, 1 turn of movement behind, 4 Crusader squads and everything else that's scouting up the board. So I think it's possible to run them there. I don't think I would do it in Righteous Crusaders. I really want to take a transport in Righteous Crusaders. Um, I guess you could, in theory, uh, strat reserves them, but now you're dependent on sticking them behind cover when they come in, um, because otherwise your opponent is just going to shoot them off the board. So you can't. They're not durable enough to like stand there and be like, "Haha, here I am, come get me," kind of
Yeah,
thing.
and your opponent's not going to be deploying within charge range of the edge of the board anyway.
No,
Um, most good players are screening the important parts of the board that they care about.
with Traff.
So that's just yeah, you're going to just be coming right on a place that where you don't want to come anyway, or something unimportant. So yeah, I wouldn't strat reserve them either. They don't really contribute to the game when they come into the board unless they can charge something, and it's very unlikely that's going to happen unless
Yeah,
it's going to be something dirtball cheap. And if they're going to give you even a chaff where you can consolidate out of that and get a slingshot, I think that they made a grave mistake in the game.
yeah, yeah, exactly. So yeah. So what other strategies and tactics do you have, Bob, for running this unit? Like, what kind of target priority are you utilizing with them, and what sorts of things are you sending them towards?
These guys are the things that kill the tougher things. So think of uh, Eight Bound or monsters or even Terminator things. These are the things that I'm going to be going into to attack to munch through. Now I don't want to charge something that I know is not going to die, um, and that actually would be some varieties of Terminators. Deathwing, Inner Circle Terminators come to mind. I wouldn't charge into those. I probably would avoid going into Death Guard Terminators. Um, but there a lot of the more um, units that your opponent is using for close combat, those are the things I want to charge. Those are the tough things that I want to kill because I want to get the charge on them, and then I'll do the damage first. Obviously, if they have fights first, don't charge them because that's a mistake.
Yep.
But yeah, they have a lot of damage. They're going to push through a ton of wounds, and in power weapon, so AP -2 or greater weaponry. So they're likely not to have very good saves, if any. So they can take out something that's tough and durable with those high power weapons that are damage 2. Or, and this is kind of an exception to that, is if you have something that is like a really annoying blob of Space Marine unit that is sitting on an objective, like in a mirror match, a big giant unit of Crusader squad, or maybe you have a 10-man Intercessor squad that's been just pounding you, or Stern Guard unit that's a 10-man.
Mhm.
Those are the perfect units that you're going to charge into because they're going to kill every one of them,
Yeah.
and then you're going to go straight into something else.
Something else to consider too. You mentioned like some of the tougher Terminators, like Dark Angels. They have -1 damage. -1,
Yep.
anything that's -1 damage, you're gonna struggle with because they're effectively negating your ability here. And however, that being said, things that have half damage, like Catan, for example, you essentially ignore it for the most part. That's an oversimplification, but because of the way the math works, you divide before you add. So you're going to divide your damage one weapon. It becomes zero point 0.5. Then you add 1. So now you're at 1.5. And then you round up. So it goes to 2. So the damage 1 things are going to stay damage 2 even against half damage stuff. Now your damage 2 stuff is going to lose a damage. It's not going to go to 3. It'll go to 2. But still, all the damage 1 things are the ones you want to get to 2, and
Yep.
it so it, with damage 1 stuff, +1 damage effectively ignores half damage stuff. So those pesky Catan and anything else that has half damage. I think the Avatar of Cain has half damage or something like that. There's a couple other big monsters that have half damage. You can just be like, I don't care. So,
Yep.
and it's important to know how that works because those players may question you on it. What do you mean it ignores? Um, the way modifiers work, there's an order of operations, and this is in the rules commentary. So if you need to look it up, go there and check it out. And that's how that works. So,
Yeah.
um,
But to really kind of summarize it, it's you don't want to go into like an assault intercessor 5-man assault intercessor
no,
squad unless you really want to like take that objective for points. It's not a good target.
no,
You're not sending a 250-point unit at something that costs 75 points.
right,
So
yeah, exactly,
the point is kill something of value to your opponent, to
yeah,
their game plan, or get some points out of it because you're probably not going to keep them around on foot for very long.
no, and you want to uh, kill something of value to your opponent, but also kill something that is going to be a problem for you, right? If this unit lives, it's going to do X, Y, and Z, uh, and so you can get rid of it so that it can't and hamper your own battle plan.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right. So, any other last tactics or tips and final thoughts, Bob?
Yeah, I just think that they're a great toolkit unit that you can have. They are more expensive than they were at the beginning when we first reviewed them. Now, at the time of this recording, 150 points for the units, but we are still not paying for any equipment and likely will not through the end of the edition. So, tool them up as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
Use them as much as you can. Practice, stage your dice, and as Alex mentioned, only roll the dice that you think that you need to use to kill whatever it is that you're charging. Most of the time, you won't even need to roll the Thunderhammer
Yeah.
until the end. So don't even worry about that one. Your Lightning Claw and uh, your Mastercrafted and
Those are the two I start with. Is
yep,
those two?
those ones are going to be
I
the
start
two
with a
big
well.
ones.
I start with a character. So Helbrecht, EC, whoever. Start with the character, and then I go to the Sorbro Castellan, and then the claws. And usually by then, I've decimated the unit, and uh, you know, oftentimes I found there's no need to roll the rest of the dice because everything's either dead or there's like one guy left and my opponent's like, how many more attacks do you still have? I'm just gonna pick this guy up. so um, so yeah, definitely that's the way I would prioritize rolling your dice for them. So
Yeah,
um, there was something
overall, really
else.
good units. They're still competitive in the meta for us, especially if you're in Righteous Crusaders. In Gladius, they're still important because you can get access to advance and charge with them. That would be the only other exception, other than Wrath or Crusade, where I might take them on foot. But even without that, you can still advance a charge out of an impulsor, so it's still important. The impulsor still gives you the ability to
Well,
do some movement blocking, or even
you can
charging into combat.
you can advance and then charge the next turn.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, the next
not
turn.
on the same turn. Yeah. So final thought I have, Bob. Are they an auto take?
I don't think they're auto take, but I think they're pretty as close to a unit that we want to take in most of our lists as you can probably get. Um,
Yeah.
at least for the Black Templars units. So I don't think there is another unit in the list that we're taking more than these. If you're looking at the Black Templars playing, this is the first unit that you're looking at, even more so than the Crusaders. They fit more lists in general. They
Mm-hmm.
do more damage. They're the data sheet that can function outside of Righteous Crusader the most. Uh, so because of just the rules that they have baked into their datasheet, and they can work with anything that we want to use with them. So they're not datasheet dependent or detachment dependent, and that's one of their benefits. They're
Yep.
great at what they do. They got an extra wound. They do extra damage. They're often compared to the Blade Guard veterans, but just in general, they accept buffs better, and they buff their characters more. So overall, I think they're just a better take
And they have
in
better
general.
character options. Our special characters cannot go with Blade Guard. So yeah. So all right, guys. Well, that's the video. Tell us what you think down in the comments. Do you agree? Is there anything we missed that we left out on running these units or synergies with these units? What successes have you had with them? And don't forget to smash that subscribe button, like this video, all those things. The YouTube algorithm button helps us in tremendous ways that, we greatly appreciate everything that our subscribers do. We have a Patreon, lots of great benefits there. We also have YouTube membership. If you guys would like to support us, we would greatly appreciate it. Helps us keep able to make these videos, and keep bringing more content to you guys. Check us out on Discord as well, link down in the description. Lots of great tactics talk there every day. You can get help for whatever it is you need Black Templars related. And until next time, keep on crusading.